Erev Tov Binyamina. Good morning in Breckenridge. Greetings to all of our friends around the country, around Israel, around the world. My name's Wayne Firestone on behalf of the America-Israel Friendship League. It's Sunday and it is Father's Day. So for those of you celebrating in one way or another, first of all, thanks for being with us for this little mini celebration. We promise an exciting, engaging conversation. We can't promise you that you'll have a wine tasting on our dime, but hey, bring out the best you got in the house, because we really have a treat today with some not just wine aficionados, but a family that has grown up loving, growing, and creating wine, and they're going to share with us what that has looked like for them, and hopefully that you can enjoy as well. But before we begin, it is Father's Day, so let's make this a moment for anyone who wants to honor a father or a father figure. Go ahead, put someone's name into the chat. It could be your father, it could be someone else's father, but someone who you want to just say, hey, Pops, thanks, and a little bit of gratitude. And if you're a wine drinker, maybe we've got a few recommendations of some wines that you can try later in the day. It is early in the morning, I think, out on the West Coast. Not quite 5 o'clock, but we still have Jeff Morgan with us. Jeff is indeed a wine lover and someone who has created great wines, but also written about great wines. His background is as a journalist, and he has shared as a journalist as well about those wines as the West Coast editor of Wine Spectator. But for purposes of today's episode, we are thrilled to introduce him as the founding winemaker and co-owner of Coventry Winery and Coventry Wines. And we're excited to hear that story, not just from him, but from his daughter. And what a great way to celebrate Father's Day and spotlighting this father-daughter team. It's more than that. This is a family affair. We'll get to that. But indeed, the father-daughter connection is one that's very special to anyone with daughters or children, and have had the privilege and challenges of running a multi-generational family business in the way the Morgans have. Zoe is herself quite the expert on Israel and Israeli wines and regional wines from her own travels and expeditions and studies in Israel, which started at the University of Haifa on a junior year abroad program, and ultimately led her to make Aliyah and spend more time in Israel and to represent the Coventry wines in Israel and to learn more about the Israeli winemaking scene. And we're going to hear from Zoe today about that special process. So let's start the episode. Let's start our discussion for Father's Day. We're going to go with Jeff first in honor of Father's Day, although I understand, Jeff, sometimes you invoke that privilege other days of the year as well. A little birdie whispered in my ear earlier. So happy Father's Day, and tell us a little bit how you got into the wine business and the family wine business.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Wayne. And Zoe and I are both delighted to be here on Father's Day for the AIFL Father's Day winemaking, American winemaking, Israeli winemaking session today. It's an honor and a pleasure for both of us. At least Zoe, currently it's a pleasure for Zoe. We're just starting, ask her about it in an hour. But I would like to, there's one little thing that we need to correct, just getting started. The name of the winery is close to Coventry, but it's not Coventry. It's Covenant.
Covenant. My apologies, Jeff. My apologies, Jeff. I can't read my own.
Wayne, you are not the first and certainly not the last to say Coventry. Sounds good, but I think that's in another part of the world. Anyways, so Covenant is the name of the winery, and our Israeli wines we bottle under the Covenant Israel label. So we've made wine. Well, we started Covenant, or I did, with my wife Jody. That would be Zoe's mom. 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, and we started in Napa Valley. And in 2013, we released our first Israeli wine, which we made in the Galilee. And we made wine in Israel, or we have made wine in Israel for 9 vintages, starting in 2013. Our last vintage was 2021, and it's been quite a ride in Israel as well as in the Napa Valley. Zoe, what do you have to say about all this?
Yeah, I think, we started Covenant out in 2003, and I think through winemaking, which, we were a winemaking family before we started Covenant, but by making Covenant and looking for finding ways to kind of have a deeper connection with our Jewish identity, we were able to find that through winemaking, through the language that we spoke, which initially inspired my parents to go check out Israel, a winemaking region that they've heard about for years, and were very curious to see what was going on there. And at the same time, I was kind of curious to move out there and try something on my own. I think I was initially going out there to try and get away from my family, and it ended up just, kind of backfiring. And I'm very pleased that it backfired, because I get to work with my parents. And even though I lived on the other side of the world, I was still deeply connected to them and our family business. And that was a really wonderful thing to be able to do.
Well, we'll get into how you made that sort of epiphany that, this journey to Odysseus's journey away led you back home, ultimately, or at least the home of the family business to be. So I know we have an initial video that we're going to share. Anything you want to say about the setup for this?
Yeah, this is a little kind of video slideshow that we have put together that is narrated by our phenomenal managing director for our winery, Zoë Kleinler, who's also American-Israeli. And it's just a quick little video giving a little intro about Covenant, the wines that we make, our story. So it's just a great way for everyone to familiarize themselves with our brand and the last 20 years of what we've been doing.
Great.
Greetings from Covenant, the world's only American-Israeli winery. Thousands of years ago, before anyone even lived in California, the Jews of Israel were making high-quality wines not only for themselves, but also for their Greek and Roman neighbors. We thought we'd share a few images with you to help to get to know us better. Whether at our urban winery in Berkeley, California, our vineyards in Napa Valley, or Israel's northern Galilee, we try to harness the best qualities found in each of our vineyards. To this end, we harvest at full maturity and ferment all our wines with native yeast. But it takes a village, and in the winery, there's always a lot to do, from cleaning tanks to sampling the wines that age gracefully in barrels. Sometimes it seems like we're dealing with a sea of grapes, and the challenge is always to get them picked on time. Here's a shot of Covenant co-founder Jeff Morgan harvesting our Napa Valley Solomon Cabernet with his daughter Zoe, who now works for Covenant Israel and is based in Tel Aviv. Whether in California or Israel, the goal is to make the best wine we can to enhance your dining pleasure. For us, it's all about food and wine. And we like to cook too. Here's one of our favorite photos of Covenant co-owner Zoë Morgan shopping at her favorite chicken stand at the Carmel Shuk in Tel Aviv. We look forward to sharing our binational and historical wine perspective with all of you today. Please remember that you are all welcome to visit Covenant in California or Israel. Meanwhile, we wish you b'te'avon.
So Jeff, if let's looking at those images and the Carmel market as a sourcing place for lots of other great food. If you're a winemaker, does that automatically make you a foodie?
I hope so, because there's nothing like a good glass of wine with a good meal. I don't drink a lot of wine without food. So, and since Jody and I have written 10 cookbooks, I suppose that would also define us as foodies. But you know, food and wine. I mean, there's a reason that it's one phrase.
You know, it wasn't so long ago, perhaps, Jeff, we're close enough in appearance anyway, that we remember a time when Israel was not really known for food or wine. And it seems like in a relatively short period of time, as these things go, certainly in Israel's history, Israel is just on the map in many really sophisticated ways in the food scene, in the wine scene. Can you share a little bit about your own journey in terms of, you know, how you discovered Israel and Israeli wines and sort of, you know, found your niche in this?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, it's funny to think of, you know, a Jew from New York discovering Israel. But since Israel was there long before the Jews of New York were there. But I was, I've been making wine and involved with wine since before Zoe was born, about 35 years. And I had started making Covenant because in 2003, because I had tasted a really fantastic wine from Israel in Napa Valley, where we were living at the time. And my business partner, my late business partner, Leslie Rudd, and I, Leslie owned a vineyard in Napa, and we were tasting this fantastic wine from Castel, Domaine du Castel winery, which is really one of the most beautiful wineries in Israel, and they make terrific wines. And we said to ourselves, gosh, this is a great wine. You know, maybe we could make a great kosher wine like this in Napa Valley. And then neither Leslie nor I were particularly religious, but I don't know, we just thought, wow, kosher wine, Israel. Turns out that the wine was not even kosher that we were tasting. It was, Castel today does make kosher wine, but back then we were tasting a vintage that was not yet kosher, but we assumed it was kosher, it being from Israel, which was kind of a silly assumption, since not all the wines in Israel are kosher. But that notwithstanding, it inspired us to start Covenant. And then some, I don't know, 7 or 8 years later, I guess in 2011, we thought, gee, we haven't really been to Israel. I had been there once for a few weeks when I was 19, but I really hadn't been back in almost 40 years. So we went to Israel, and the food scene that you're talking about, Wayne, had already started. There were a lot of great restaurants to go visit. We reconnected with our many family members that I had in Israel, and we also drank some terrific wines. And then we went up to the wine country in the Galilee, and I noticed that the terroir, or the terrain, as they say in wine talk, reminded me very much of the Rhone Valley in the south of France, and also parts of Napa, these what we call terra rossa soils, iron-rich soils that are just loaded with limestone outcroppings. And this is like the perfect soil for growing grapes. I mean, it's just, wherever you go in the world in a Mediterranean climate and see the soil, you know they're going to be doing something really interesting in terms of viticulture. And you know, between the restaurant scene and the really good Israeli wines we were drinking, and this vision I had of the next great Rhone Valley or Napa Valley, I said to Leslie, my partner, I said, we got to make wine here. I mean, we're Jews, and this is really our country.
That's amazing. I know you all have put together some slides. Zoe, I just wanted to ask you, before we start looking at some of the visuals and hearing more about how the business sort of evolved, both in California and in Israel, and with your family's connections in both places. Did you tell us about growing up in a family that appreciated food and wine, and when you sort of had that aha moment that there was a place for you in this that was a different voice, a different something that you had in particular to add to parents who were, had this expertise and these interests as you were growing up?
I thought it was pretty normal most of my life. Probably up until I left my parents' home and I went to college. I thought it was pretty normal for people to drink wine in their meals. And not necessarily just about drinking and eating, but having conversations really focused about what is it that you're eating and drinking? Where is the food that you're eating and drinking coming from? What's the story behind it? Who are the people behind it? And that was a very hot topic in our family. And we were living in the Napa Valley. So there's a lot of like-minded people living there where they're very focused on what they're eating and drinking. And I spent a lot of my weekends doing what a lot of my friends were doing, which is if we're not hanging out together, we're probably with our parents, visiting wineries or vineyards, meeting with suppliers, doing things that you're like, okay, what am I going to do on a Saturday? I don't have plans. Okay, I'll go with my dad and we'll go visit some vineyards and we'll check on the grapes and we'll do what you need to do. So, I think my childhood was really brought up with this sort of focus on food and wine and sort of the continuation, the passing down the knowledge to the next generation. A lot of my friends that I grew up were third, fourth generation of winemaking families. So these were just very common things that were being discussed and being told. And then when I went to college, I realized, okay, maybe this is different. Maybe I had a kind of different upbringing. But it really wasn't until I went to Israel when I was really finally far away from my parents and kind of doing my own thing that I realized there was something really missing in my life. And I realized that for many years, I didn't want to be in the wine industry. I wanted to try and do something else. But then I realized that the wine industry is not just a profession, it's a lifestyle. And I realized that was something that was definitely missing. And at the same time, we were starting to make a little more wine in Israel. By this point, I think it was maybe our third or fourth harvest. And we were, when you start making wine, we started making very small amounts, kind of just getting a feel for how things were kind of running there. But by 2015, 2016, we started making a larger amount of wine. And my parents really wanted a family presence or someone that could really kind of be the representative for our brand and a key point person. And I was in Israel. Yeah. I was pretty unhappy with my job in Israel at the time. And
the previous job.
Yeah, my current job at the time. And so I think the timing worked out really well. I think, obviously I live in California now. I live 20 minutes from my parents, so I'm no longer in Israel. But I think at that point in my life, I don't know if I would have been able to work with my parents or in the wine industry if I was so physically close to them. I think having that that distance of me being in Israel and then being in California was the way that kind of allowed me to work with my family and work in the wine industry, but kind of pave my own way and build my own relationships and connections, and kind of have ownership over my career, so that when they would come, I was the one sort of leading things and telling them how things were operating. And so that, I think, played a very big role. I don't think that would have been able to, that necessarily would have panned out that way if I was in California.
All right. Well, thank you for that setup, both of you. Just it's really interesting to see how this sort of evolved. I know you put some thought into telling a story also visually, so we can share a little of this with the audience. So why don't we bring up some of those slides? And I know the two of you are going to share.
Wayne and our crew that nobody can see. I just want to add a couple of little things to what Zoe said before we show that slideshow. So, I mean, what Zoe didn't say is that the plan was and still remains to build a winery in Israel, like similar to the one we have in California. However, the road has been rather circuitous and rocky for many reasons. One being my business partner, Leslie Rudd, who started Covenant with me in California, and then was also hell bent on building this second winery in Israel. He died about 5 years ago, and so that kind of derailed us a bit in terms of our the economics of getting started. It does cost a lot of money to build a winery and get started, as we have done in California. And although we were making a lot of wine at another winery in Israel, we really wanted our own because that's economically the most feasible way to have a successful business. So then something called COVID came along, and that kind of messed us up some more. Basically, all the restaurants in Israel closed for about a year and a half, and those restaurants, those fabulous restaurants, were very important to our business in Israel. So all of a sudden, we had no income.
Yeah, I would just to interrupt really quickly. I would say, the majority of the wines we were selling in Israel, we were selling in restaurants, and we were selling, it was phenomenal. We could go to the best restaurants, I think, in the world are in Tel Aviv and throughout Israel and have our wines. So COVID was very difficult for us, for folks who were in Israel during the pandemic, where restaurants were it was shut down and there was nothing we could do about it. So that was a big strain for us.
Well, then, and another problem was that I had been going to Israel, I don't know, 6-7 times a year. I was spending 3 or 4 months a year in Israel for 6-7 years, 8 years. And the great thing was I got to spend time with Zoe, which was really fun. She was far away, but it seemed like I was always getting on a plane and flying into Tel Aviv, and Zoe was right there to meet me. So, and then we got to work together for several weeks at a time while I was there. She would go nuts because, she was stuck with her dad, nonstop, but I really loved it. She was my confidant, my translator, my chauffeur, my sales rep. I mean, Zoe really was handling it all, and it was fantastic having you there, Zoe. And but I couldn't even get into Israel during COVID because I didn't have Israeli citizenship. And it wasn't enough that my daughter lived there and that we had a business there and that we had employees. We just could not get in. So I've been planning to make Aliyah anyway at some point, and that was just an incentive. So we became Israeli citizens, and Jody and me, and that is nice. Now we all have Israeli passports, and we can come and go. For the next pandemic, we're safe. We're going to be able to get right in, and that's a good thing, right? So,
by the way, that's Jeff's sense of humor, everybody. He's not actually hoping for that scenario.
No, I'm not hoping. I'm definitely not hoping. Anyway, so we had the pandemic, we had COVID. That kind of knocked us back, and the death of our partner, Leslie Red. By the way, we have a new partner, Jeff Rochwager, who's an old friend and colleague. And Jeff lives in Israel full time. He lives in Bet Shemesh. So we still have a solid foundation in Israel from a business standpoint, and I'm glad to be able to share that with you. But we also so the plan was to build that winery and have Zoe run it. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I still want to build that winery. And so does Jeff, my partner. But we just have not been able to get it going. And so we're still working on that. And we'll keep you posted.
Awesome. Great. To continue to try to realize the dream. And in the meantime, you guys have really found ways to operate on both sides of the pond, even under the worst set of circumstances during the pandemic. And I remember, Jeff, when we spoke previously, earlier in the pandemic, this real challenge for people with any kind of businesses that had supply chains that required selling and to anyone but other than direct to customers, I suppose, and the inventive ways that people had to come up in your industry to continue to just function and survive some way. Let's take a look at some of the photos so we can get the bigger picture before we sort of continue the conversation and allow Zoe to reveal some of the worst dad jokes that she's heard over her lifespan. Jeff, go ahead I mean, the pictures themselves, I think people will it sort of tells its own story, but tell us what we're looking at.
Well, the first couple of can we hold off for a second, just right there in the winery? But those first couple of slides were pictures of one of our best vineyards in the Napa Valley. It belonged to our late partner, Leslie Rudd. We made some phenomenal Cabernet from that vineyard. There was an earlier slide of Zoë and me in that vineyard harvesting the grapes one year. I don't remember what vintage that was. And Zoë had come back to work with us during the harvest. And then another image was looking down on the Napa Valley, which is, that's where we really got our start with Covenant. And we still have, and Zoë grew up there, and we have a lot of friends and colleagues, and we still source grapes from the Napa Valley. So we have fond feelings and memories of that phenomenal wine growing region in California. But in 2014, we left Napa Valley. Zoë was already living in Israel, and her sister Sky had moved to New York, I believe, and she's in the restaurant business, although Sky is now back as well in California. But we decided that we didn't want to watch the grapes grow anymore in Napa. We thought we would move to a more urban environment, Berkeley, California, where, believe it or not, we could build a winery from scratch for far less money than it would cost us to do the same thing in Napa Valley. And since we don't own vineyards in the Napa Valley, but source our grapes from all over the state, Berkeley was rather centrally located. We truck our grapes in from vineyards extending from the Santa Barbara area all the way up to Lake County, and that includes Napa and Sonoma. So, and Lodi actually as well, which is another fabulous wine growing region. Anyway, we built this winery in 2014 in what we call the Gilman Drinks District. There, believe it or not, there are 6 other wineries 2 blocks from us, and it's kind of the winemaking central of the East Bay, as we call the 2 cities, Oakland and Berkeley, east of San Francisco. And we have about 600 barrels in this winery. We also have our tanks. You can see them at the back. We have a forklift. Without a forklift, you can't do anything. And then way up at the top, you can see a window on the left side of your screen. That is Jody Morgan's office, and now Zoë shares that office with her. That's the biggest office in our winery for the most important people. Okay, let's go on. Next photo, please. I think I mentioned somewhere along the line that, or maybe it was Wayne who asked if we were foodies. And indeed, we have written 10 cookbooks, starting with Dina DeLuca, the Food and Wine Cookbook. And we've written cookbooks for other wineries like the Plumpjack Winery and Domaine Chandon. But our most recent cookbook is the Covenant Kitchen, Food and Wine for the New Jewish Table. And it's the most recent and the last one we wrote back in 2015. And it's kind of an ode to our life in wine and food, 100 recipes, all with wine pairings. And then there's a chapter on how to pair food and wine, and another chapter on how we make wine. There are a lot of great photographs in this book. So we really enjoyed writing it, and that's the cover, although you can't see the top of the book, but that's the cover. So the next photograph, please. That's yours truly, obviously, in a vineyard. I don't really have a whole lot more to say about it, although I'm at the top of a mountain in Sonoma you see the grapes behind me. They're green because it was early in the season. Those grapes had not gone through what we call veraison. They had not turned color. Eventually, they would become very dark blue and or red, and eventually they would go into some of our best Cabernet Sauvignon. Next, please. Oh, so now we're really plumbing the ancient history of Covenant. This picture, I believe, was taken the year I became a father. I think it's 1989. I was working in a vineyard in New York, in Long Island, New York. Zoë was still about 2 years away from joining us. but Jody was pregnant with her sister Sky, and we didn't have a vineyard this year. I was just working I mean, we didn't have a winery. I was working in the vineyard. I had a lot of protective gear on, as you can see, protecting my face and my head. Unfortunately, I was not protecting my arms from various pesticides and stuff that we were using. But they obviously were not too noxious because I survived. And we made some phenomenally good Chardonnay that year and some pretty good Cabernet as well. It was 1989. And Sky joined us, Zoe's sister Sky, she joined us on August 21st, right in the middle of harvest. If you're a winemaker and you're a father, or you want to be a father, try not to have,
or mother.
try not to have children in the middle of harvest. It's extremely stressful, even more stressful than just having children. But we did it. Zoe was much smarter. She knew she was born in January. Next slide, please. Yep. So I think Zoe was around then. I was, I think I was doing replants at this vineyard called Christina Vineyard, which sold to a family called Macari, and is now Macari Vineyard. Again, in New York and Long Island. This was the beginning of the Morgan family's wine experience. I had been a professional saxophone player until 1988, and I kind of burned out on the music business and decided to become a winemaker. And we moved out to the wine country in New York and started working in this vineyard. And eventually we built the winery there too. Next slide, please. We're ready for the next slide. There we are. Oh, well, there's another ode, another walk down memory lane. I guess that was in the winter, probably when Zoe was born a few years later. Still New York, and obviously I was not working as hard that day, just posing for pictures. Next, please. And there they are, the two daughters, and Jody on the left, obviously, and I'm on the right. And gosh, you were so cute. That's Zoe is the little one with the purple shirt, and Sky is the other one. And we lived in a farmhouse in Long Island, New York, that was built in 1720. It was one of the oldest houses on Long Island, and we lived on a 200-acre farm that did not unfortunately belong to us, but we rented the house on the farm, and those were the good old days, right? So, by the way, Zoe, you can interrupt me if you want. You're welcome to interrupt me if I get something wrong.
I don't have any memories of this period, so I'm going to just let you take it away and trust you.
This was short, and soon thereafter we moved to California, but those were some of the early years in New York. Next, please. Wow. Again, the girls. Zoe is on the left. This is actually earlier, and Sky's on the right. This is in Tortola in the British Virgin Islands, where Jody's parents had a home, and we like to bring the kids down there and hang out when we weren't growing grapes. Next, please. Who is that? So is that you?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's me.
I think so. Okay, that's a nice picture. Zoe picked all these pictures out, by the way. So I haven't seen many of them in a long time, and this is really fun, but we can go to the next.
Well, it's a Father's Day webinar, so you get to go down memory lane as well.
Yeah. We are in California now. We moved out to California in 1995 when I was appointed West Coast editor of the Wine Spectator magazine. It's the biggest and among the best wine publications, I think, in the English language. And I was honored to work for them for 8 years before I went back to winemaking. But because they moved us to California, we New Yorkers got to discover the West Coast of the United States and the wine growing regions here. This is obviously a pumpkin patch. I don't think there are any grapes in sight. but I think we were living near that pumpkin patch at the time. And Zoe is on the right, the one with the big smile. Okay, next, please. I would say, one of the best things about being a father is watching your kids grow up. And, Sky and Zoe, they're very close. It's great that we all kind of live close to each other. For a long time, Zoe was in Israel for almost 10 years. Sky was in New York for 7 years, and they weren't seeing each other very often. But now, today, we all get to go down to the winery and listen to a concert that's going on there this afternoon. And we'll have a Father's Day dinner together with all of our families. And both Zoe and Sky are married. Sky just got married 2 weeks ago, and Zoe's been married for what, 5 years? And oddly enough, both their husbands are Israeli. So, it's just one of those things. We have become a very Israeli-American or American-Israeli family. And considering we didn't start off particularly observant of any Jewish traditions, it's a bit of a miracle, I think.
You are the poster family for the America-Israel Friendship League. It feels like.
Maybe we are. I don't know. It's all of this has been unplanned, but maybe it's as we say, beshert. I don't know.
Certainly.
Next. So this is really interesting. This is our favorite dog, Chloe, right there at the bottom. Chloe is Ari Earl, winemaker Ari Earl's dog. And Ari is in this picture, but you can't see him. He's obscured by the guy with the big floppy hat on the left. This is Sivon Vineyard in the Galilee, where we have sourced some phenomenally good Syrah grapes over the years. It's a biodynamic vineyard, so it's very organic. It's beyond organic, but it's a very naturally grown grapes. The mountain in the back is Mount Meron, and the vineyard is on a kibbutz, but the main agricultural activity there is growing grapes. And I think the guy with the floppy hat is not Ido Levinson. It's Ido. What's Ido's last name, Zoe?
I don't know. Yeah, we'll continue on.
Yeah. Anyway, but that's Ido, who manages the vineyard. He's very dedicated to his craft. And who else? I can't really tell who we're with there.
That's Batel. This vineyard, this vineyard is this was sort of the staple vineyard that we were working with in Israel. It's a kibbutz called Sivon, it's not Tivon, but Sivon. It's a kibbutz that is very small. I think there's maybe like 45 or 50 families that live there. It's in the Upper Galilee, and it's close to a village called Jish. And we really loved going up to this vineyard and being able to work with Ido, who is a phenomenal grower, super knowledgeable. He was living in South Africa and Australia, and is just really was such a pleasure to work with. And it was also very close to our favorite restaurant in the village of Jish, where we would get lunch, and it was the spot to go if you were a winemaker in Israel. You would go there and you would see a lot of winemakers drinking beer and having hummus or salads and kind of getting some air conditioning and taking a break during harvest. So that's an area we spend a lot of time up there.
Yeah, there are quite a few wineries. There's an industrial area, industrial meaning a place where a lot of buildings have been built, and there are wineries, and it's the Dalton industrial area. Not only is Dalton Winery there, but a Deer Winery, where we were making our wines for many years, is up there. And we have a friend who's got a winery called Shvo, which is nearby. So that's why you bump into all these winemakers in the restaurant in Jish, because there are probably 50 winemakers working within 3 or 4 miles of the little village up there. Next. So we're back in the States. This is Jody, my wife, Zoe's mom, and me. And a couple of years ago, and this is in our winery. We have a 9,000 square foot winery in Berkeley. It's pretty big, actually, and it's very industrially designed, as you can see, a lot of metal and concrete, but that's kind of in keeping with the vibe, the city vibe. We don't have a bucolic agrarian atmosphere in Berkeley. It's a city. Next, please.
So these are just, you can start kind of going through the next couple of photos. These are photos of me during harvest. This is our winemaker, Jonathan, standing on barrels. Here's my dad and Jonathan. These are just a bunch of great little photos of the people behind Covenant. And we can pause here.
Hold on.
Pause here. This is my husband with my husband Guy with dad. They're doing their favorite thing together, which is smoke cigars. And my husband will drink port and my dad will drink scotch. And this is in an area that we go to every summer in West Marin. My husband's Israeli. We moved to the United States in December of 2021. So he is living in America for the first time in his life. And he also comes from a family of agriculture. His father, who moved to Israel in the early 80s from the Netherlands, is a very successful drip irrigation specialist and works with agriculture all throughout northern Israel, actually even down in the south in the desert. He mostly works with banana farmers, but he also works with a lot of different types of grape growers. And so my husband also has some experience in the ag world by working with his dad and doing that for many years. We can continue on. This is our new partner, Jeff Roshwarger. His name is also Jeff, with the current Jeff on the webinar, my dad. This was about, I would say, 6 months after Jeff signed on as our partner. So we're all very happy. Jeff, before he was our partner in Covenant, he was just a customer, and he loves our wines. And we saw him at a wine tasting in Israel around the time that we were looking for a new partner after Leslie, our late partner, died. And he asked how we were doing, and we were like, not good. Our partner died. We're trying to find a new partner for the winery. And he was like, well, I'll be your partner. And it was, not so simple as that, but in terms of the desire and wanting to be part of the Covenant story, it was pretty easy. And so Jeff, as my dad said, lives in Beit Shemesh, but we're very fortunate to have Jeff as our partner. He has a lot of experience in the world of business and loves to drink and eat, which I think is the really most important thing to be part of the wine industry. So, yeah.
In a testament to the closeness of Israel and the United States, Jeff and his wife, Mimi, flew in from Tel Aviv 2 weeks ago for Zoe's sister's wedding in California. And they were here for one night, and then they flew back to Tel Aviv as if nothing had happened. And it was great to have them. Jeff, signed the ketubah. He was a witness. And it is easy to go back and forth. I did it quite a bit for a decade. And I think that the ties that we have as Americans to Israel are not only founded in shared history and culture, but also the miracle of modern day transport.
That's very true. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. That's me and my dad. It's a little close up, but we are in a vineyard. We're in a vineyard in Binyamina, where we were buying Carignan, a varietal that we were using for our rosé. This vineyard, it's about 45 minutes north of Tel Aviv, and it was hot as hell, super humid. And I think after this photo, we went and got a beer and a sandwich.
We did. I remember that.
Yeah.
And outside. And there's where you're
obviously the same day. This is on the far left is our winemaker that we were working with for almost a decade, Ari Earl, who is an American Israeli as well. He got his start in the wine industry in Napa Valley, but he ended up moving back to Israel with his wife. And they live in a moshav called Givat Nili, which is outside of Binyamina, very close to this vineyard. And we really love working with him. And another photo of me and Ari and Ari's dog Chloe. This is that same Carignan vineyard that we were working with in Israel. And this was a harvest. We had to get there. This is the end of the pick. We got there, I think, at like 5 a.m. At that point, it was already like 95% humidity. It was just absolutely unbearable, just so hot. And we were really ready to get out of there by the time the sun came out. It was tough. But as you can see in the far corner, there are little crates there. That's what we use for picking the grapes. And then we consolidate all that by putting it in a big bin. And the Carignan, if you can kind of see in the top left, is a really great grape for a rosé. It's a little more delicate, really big clusters. And it's a great grape for our rosé. We really loved working with that varietal.
And as you can see from Zoe's hat, oops, can we go back for 1 second? Zoe's hat, she's wearing another testament to the American-Israeli connection. That hat says Barnett Vineyards, and Barnett is a winery and vineyard that belongs to friends of ours, including 2 daughters who grew up with Skye and Zoe. And it's in the Napa Valley on top of a mountain, beautiful vineyard. And I'm glad their hat made it over to Israel. In fact, they also made it over to at least one of the daughters made it to Zoe's wedding, which occurred in Israel also 5 years ago. Okay, next, please.
So this is actually really great. So on the right-hand side, there's a photo of my dad and I wearing the same outfit. We did not plan this. This was, I think, in 2016. I came to California for harvest to get a little more hands-on experience with our production here in California. And I was there, I think, for about 2 months at the time. I was living and working at the winery in California. And then on the far left is my first harvest back in California with Dad after moving back to California in 2021. This is in a new vineyard that we started working with, Cabernet Sauvignon. I think in Israel, I really started out where I would drive my dad around to vineyards and meetings, and he would be able to relax and chill in the car and sort of talk about everything with life. And I would drive and we would visit vineyards, we'd meet with suppliers. And then we now kind of do the same thing here in California, where I get to drive us around in his big truck, which I love to drive. And we check on vineyards and we meet with our growers. And it's really special.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Next, please.
So just more photos. That's my dad on the left with our Ari's dog Chloe, who we love. On the far right, this was my 31st birthday. No, my 30th birthday. I'm holding a bottle of I think I can't remember what the varietal is, but that was a bottle from 1992 that Dad had been saving for my 30th birthday.
Yeah.
That we got to drink together. So yeah, we can continue on. This is the new vineyard that we're starting to work with, is Cabernet Vineyard in Napa. This was photo was taken last year. As you can see, it's before bud break. It's before you're starting to see any really growth coming in terms of leaves or grapes coming out of the vineyard. So this is a time where we get to come and check out the pruning and kind of see what's going on in the vineyard before harvest kicks in.
Next.
This is back in 2016 when I came to work harvest in California. My husband ended up coming out for a little bit. At the time, we weren't married. And we're rocking our harvest swag. So every year we have some type of swag. This was a very simple harvest swag that we did. It was these just blue hoodies that unfortunately we don't have a photo of us on the back. On the back, it said the harvest 5776, which was the Hebrew year. And I think this is probably the best harvest swag we've had. I think we need to bring it back, the same exact kind, because we all love these jackets. So we can go to the next slide. That's me and my husband. Actually, this was probably 2 days after our wedding. We got married in the end of July. Harvest starts a little earlier in Israel. It's a little hotter, a little more humid. Grapes ripen much faster. So this was not during a pick day, but it was right before we were figuring out if we were going to pick Viognier. And actually, if you see in the very back on the left, the left shoulder of my husband, there's a little hill. That is Lebanon. So this vineyard is really right on the border of Lebanon. Maybe, I don't know, actually, maybe it's a little further back. Just trying to think in terms of the direction we're facing. But this vineyard was right by Kibbutz Yiftach, for folks who know that area. It is really the only thing you see besides vines are little Lebanese villages in the background. We were sourcing Viognier from here, and it was just the most phenomenal vineyard ever. Unfortunately, the vineyard was sold. They ripped up the vines and they now plant, I think, peaches there. Growing grapes is hard. Growing grapes is expensive. And, you know, being a farmer, you really need to think about how much time you have to really be 100% in your vineyards. And I think for the folks who owned this vineyard at the time, it was just too much work for them. But it was really too bad because you can see that beautiful terra rossa soil my dad was talking about on the ground there. And it was just a phenomenal place to grow grapes.
Yeah, I think we're almost, okay.
Yeah, just, you know,
Yeah.
what we can keep going through.
Keep going.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of this guy.
More,
I love
we've
this.
seen
I love
this.
this. Wait. I love that picture of you, Zoe. Can we go back one? Can we go back? Yeah, that picture of Zoe on the left, that's one of my, no, not yet. That's one of my favorite pictures of Zoe of all time. And that's in that same vineyard in the Upper Galilee, right next to the Lebanese border. Zoe is picking Viognier. And you can see the red soil, that awesome iron-rich red soil. We call it terra rossa. And then right behind it, all of that limestone has been cleared from that vineyard to make it possible to plow the land and everything. But the soil is just loaded with limestone, which, again, as I said earlier in the show, is the perfect combination for great grape growing.
Yeah.
Okay, next, please.
The photo next to it. These are my early years working with our vineyards. Pro tip, never wear a white shirt in a vineyard. This shirt, I think the reason I wore this shirt again in this vineyard that's to the right was because I wore it one day for harvest and it was totally destroyed. So yeah, white is not a good idea.
Okay, next, please.
That's us last harvest in Lodi, checking on grapes.
California.
Yep. We can go to the next photo.
That's our label. That's our Covenant Israel label.
Yeah.
And the 2016 Syrah, we saw that vineyard earlier on, one of our first Chloe the dog pictures. Extraordinary. I think this may be one of the best wines I've ever made in my life. If you can find it, and we don't have any for sale anymore. The 2016 Covenant Israel Syrah is just an extraordinary testament, in my opinion, to just how good wine can be from the place where it all started, probably about 10,000 years ago.
Well, that, you know, I feel like we just, our whole audience, live audience, and those that are going to watch this afterwards on the mighty YouTube version, just got to see a family album of a lot of smiling faces in Napa Valley, in the Upper Galil, and as you said, Jeff, with a brand that is thousands of years old. I don't know how you got it for your wine. That itself seems like a coup. But what, despite all the smiling pictures and all of the beautiful grapes and terrain, aside from COVID, what are some of the unique challenges that you know you had to overcome? Zoe referred to challenges of just, you know, agrarian life and the hard work and the presence for people that is not always so glamorous, but as we know, is a part of what the foundations of the state of Israel and biblical Israel, and in so many different ways. How did you connect to that tradition as well as the challenges you had to overcome?
Well, regarding the challenges, I mean, you know, agriculture is not predictable. Climate is not predictable. And every year we have new challenges in the vineyards, both in Israel and in California, or wherever else we might be making wine. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold, sometimes there's rain when you don't want it, sometimes there's no rain. The vicissitudes of any agricultural endeavor are challenging for growers. And then, of course, in the winery, we don't just bring the grapes in and they don't, you know, the wine doesn't make itself. So we have all sorts of additional challenges. Even though we are what we call minimalist winemakers, we don't add commercial yeast. We don't add any yeast, as a matter of fact. And we wait till the grapes start fermenting on their own. But there's a lot of cleanup and a lot of logistical challenges. Just getting your grapes picked and into the winery is very difficult, especially, you know, we're doing about 150 tons of grapes this year, which is a lot for what we call a small boutique winery. Yeah, it's not easy. So it's, you know, people think of winemakers as having a charmed life. Well, we might have a charmed life, but we have to work hard for it. But I would like to just add, in terms of the connection of wine to Israel and our journey, if I had to sum it up, I would say wine opened the door to agriculture, a more agrarian life. As I said earlier, I was a musician before I became a winemaker. I had a very urban life in New York City and in Europe. And so the wine helped us discover what it's like to grow things and turn them into a beautiful beverage. But that beverage happens to have a connection to Jewish heritage, Jewish culture. We make Kiddush on wine. We don't make Kiddush on beer. We don't make Kiddush on scotch, even though I like both of those beverages. We make Kiddush on wine, and it has some very special connection that, at least for our family, brought us to Israel and helped us establish a life in both Israel and California. And I'm very grateful for that. And the wine inspired us to have a more Jewish life, inspired us to become Israeli. It's all good, all very good.
Zoe, I'm going to give you the last word before we have a closing out segment. And anything that you want to express in terms of gratitude toward your dad in particular. I know this was your dad and your mom, but in honor of Father's Day, something that you took from your parents' lessons that has allowed you to assume this amazing career trajectory that you're on now.
You know, I think it's I think for a lot of folks who have children or grown children, or you're grown and you think about your parents, I think a big thing that we think about is the relationship we have with our parents and how that develops from being a child parent relationship to adult parent relationship, and how to kind of nurture those relationships. I think I happen to, regardless of the wine industry, have really great parents who are loving and supportive. But I do think the fact that I get to work in an industry with my parents who are very loving and nurturing and supportive has allowed for us to kind of develop a new sense of a relationship of how we operate as a family. You know, there's the concept, the fact that I get to see my parents every day and get to work with them every day. But there's also the fact that we have a bigger thing that we're working towards as a family. We have a goal, we have a vision, and it's a theme that, while my sister doesn't necessarily work in the wine industry, everyone's part of it. My husband's part of it. My now new brother-in-law is part of it. And I think that that's the beauty of wine and how it builds connections and it creates connections and it allows people to stay engaged with kind of their whole essence of their life in many ways. Wine covers so many different aspects of industries, whether it's agriculture, tech, design, art. There's so many things that it touches. And so I think the fact that we get to do this as a family and get to experience that together is extremely, it's really fulfilling. And I know that we're all very grateful for that. And I know that we're really grateful that we've been able to experience this, not just in the place where we grew up in California, but that's been able to grow to Israel. And as a result of our Israeli wine venture, we've been able to travel the world and get to share the beauty of Israel and the food and the wine and the history, the ancient history of the world of wine in Israel with people as a father-daughter duo. And that's really special. So that's been really lovely.
Well, that is a beautiful, beautiful tribute. I am going to, I just want to make one program note for our audience before I turn back to the other father on this panel, Jeff, to close this out with a really beautiful blessing and opportunity to share something from this father-daughter relationship that they've so generously shared with us today on the webinar. I just want to let people know we won't be having a webinar this coming Sunday. Our next webinar will be on the following Wednesday. That's June 28th, where we're going to have very special fireside chat and discussion with Natan Sharansky. So for those of you who have followed his illustrious career and are wondering what's on his mind during this period of time, a war in Russia and Ukraine, and gaining interesting insights from someone who has lived history and made history, please join us on Wednesday, the 28th. Jeff, Israel's is a place that, like your brand, has a very long history and a very deep history, and sometimes challenges that get thrown at you, like you said, like the weather, that are unexpected and otherwise. And I know as a professional musician that you referred to early in your career, you have special ways of sharing your talents and appreciate that you've agreed to share a little something from your musical world as well to help us close out the webinar today. So just tell us in short what we're going to see, and then we'll put on the video for people to see on the way out.
So 2 years ago, on May 16th, 2021, I had just recently returned to California from Israel to find to my horror that Hamas was sending missiles into Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel in one of the unfortunately regular mini wars that we seem to be experiencing. And Zoe was in Tel Aviv, spending a lot of time in her bomb shelter with her husband, Guy. And you can imagine as a father how concerned I was about the situation. And I felt really helpless. I didn't know what to do. There was nothing I could do except go down to the winery. It was right around Yom Ha'atzmaut, from Independence Day, Israeli Independence Day. And I went down to the winery and performed for nobody in particular, the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva, which means hope. And I put it on social media. And I don't know if it did any good, but Zoe, survived that onslaught, and so did I. And we're going to, I guess, close it out with my rendition of Hatikva from the winery.
Wow, happy Father's Day, and thanks for that wonderful, wonderful way to close out our segment. We hope everyone celebrating has a wonderful day. So much thanks to Zoe and Jeff for sharing the family story and the family album with us today.
Thank you, Wayne.
Everyone be safe.
Thank you, Wayne.